My daughter whispered, "You don't need to wake up," as she pressed a pillow over my face, not seeing Nurse Carol recording everything on her phone from the doorway. 45 years of loving that girl, raising her, sacrificing for her dreams. And this is how she wanted our story to end. Suffocating her own father in a hospital bed while I recovered from pneumonia. If you've ever been betrayed by your own blood, if you've ever had a child try to steal your last breath for money, sit tight, friend. This coffee's about to get bitter as death itself. And if you like stories about family that'll kill you for your wallet while crying crocodile tears at your funeral, hit that subscribe button for Grandpa's Diaries. I've got more tales about the people who should protect you being the ones who destroy you. I'm always here with fresh wisdom about blood running thicker than water, until that blood gets poisoned by greed. I was supposed to be getting better. The pneumonia had been rough on my 72-year-old lungs, but the doctors said I was responding well to treatment and would probably go home by the weekend. Rebecca had been visiting every day, bringing flowers and magazines, fussing over my blankets like the devoted daughter everyone thought she was. "Don't worry about anything, Daddy," she'd say, holding my hand. "Just focus on getting well. I'm taking care of everything at home." But lying there in that hospital bed at 3 a.m., too weak to move much but alert enough to think, I heard Rebecca talking on her phone in the hallway about things that made my blood run cold. "How much longer do we have to wait?" she was whispering to someone. "The medical bills are piling up and I can't keep pretending this is sustainable. Maybe it's time to let nature take its course, if you know what I mean." The voice that answered was her husband, Mark, and their conversation revealed a level of callousness that shocked me to my core. They were discussing my life insurance policy, my house, my savings account, calculating exactly how much my death would be worth to them. "The pneumonia's already weakened him," Mark said. "At his age, complications happen all the time. No one would question it if he just didn't recover." Rebecca's response was what broke my heart completely. "He's lived a good life. Maybe it's selfish of me to want him to suffer through more medical problems just because I'm not ready to say goodbye." But I could hear the lie in her voice, could tell she'd already made peace with murdering her own father. This wasn't about ending my suffering. This was about ending their financial problems with my inheritance. That's when she came back into my room, thinking I was asleep, carrying a pillow from the visitor's chair. I felt her hands testing my breathing, checking to see how deeply unconscious I was from the pain medications. Then she positioned that pillow over my face and pressed down while whispering those terrible words about not needing to wake up. But neither of us saw Nurse Carol Martinez standing in the doorway, her phone already recording, capturing every second of my daughter's attempt to commit the perfect murder in a place where death was common and rarely questioned. Rebecca wasn't always a killer. She was my little princess, born with bright blue eyes and her mother's sweet smile, the kind of child who made strangers stop on the street just to comment on how beautiful she was. Margaret and I had tried for years to have children before Rebecca came along, and when she finally arrived, we treated her like the miracle she was. "Look at our little angel," Margaret would whisper, rocking Rebecca to sleep in the nursery we'd painted pink with careful, loving hands. Those early years were magical. Rebecca was the kind of daughter every father dreams of. Smart, funny, affectionate, and endlessly curious about the world around her. I'd come home from long days at Thompson Construction to find her waiting by the front door, ready to show me pictures she'd drawn or stories she'd written. "Daddy's home!" she'd squeal, launching herself into my arms like I was the most important person in her universe. And in those moments, I felt like I was. I spoiled her, probably more than I should have, but after waiting so long to be a father, I wanted to give Rebecca everything I'd never had growing up. Piano lessons, dance classes, the best clothes, family vacations to Disney World and the beach. When she wanted a horse for her 16th birthday, I found a way to make it happen, building a small stable behind our house and learning about equestrian care just to see her smile. "You're the best daddy in the world," she'd tell me, and I believed her completely. Rebecca was brilliant in school, graduating valedictorian and earning a full scholarship to State University. She studied business, planning to join Thompson Construction, and eventually take over the company I'd built from nothing. "I want to carry on the family legacy," she'd tell me during summer breaks, working at the office and learning every aspect of the business. Margaret and I were so proud, dreaming of the day our daughter would be running the company that bore our name. College changed her in ways we didn't fully understand at the time. Rebecca came home with expensive tastes and high-maintenance friends, talking about investment strategies and luxury lifestyles that seemed far removed from our middle-class values. She met Mark during her senior year, a smooth-talking finance major from a wealthy family who filled her head with ideas about country clubs and European vacations. I tried to like him, but something about the way he looked at our house and cars made me uncomfortable. Their wedding was everything Rebecca had dreamed of, and everything that nearly bankrupted us. But Margaret and I gladly emptied our savings to give our daughter the fairy tale ceremony she wanted. 6 bridesmaids, a $1,000 dress, reception at the Hilton with an open bar and live band. Nothing's too good for our princess, I told Margaret as we wrote check after check. We thought we were investing in Rebecca's happiness, not funding the beginning of her transformation into someone we wouldn't recognize. After the wedding, Rebecca and Mark moved to an expensive suburb and started living way beyond their means. They bought a house they couldn't afford, drove luxury cars with payments that consumed most of their income, and seemed to believe that maintaining appearances was more important than financial stability. When they started having money problems, Rebecca began looking at me differently, not as her beloved father, but as a solution to her financial troubles. The little girl who used to draw me pictures had grown into a woman who was calculating exactly how much my death would be worth to her lifestyle. The warning signs started about a year after Margaret's death, when Rebecca began visiting more frequently, but with a different energy than before. Instead of coming to comfort her grieving father or share memories of her mother, she seemed to be conducting inventories of our house, making mental notes about furniture, artwork, and valuables. "Daddy, have you thought about updating your will?" she'd ask during these visits. "Things change when you lose a spouse and you want to make sure everything's in order." She started bringing financial advisors and estate planners to Sunday dinners, introducing them as friends who just happened to have expertise in managing elderly people's assets. "Dad's been so stressed about paperwork since Mom died," Rebecca would explain to these strangers while I sat there like a confused old man who couldn't handle his own affairs. "Maybe you could give him some advice about simplifying things." The conversations always circled back to making Rebecca my power of attorney, just in case. Rebecca's financial problems became more obvious as her visits continued. She'd mentioned credit card debt, Mark's business struggles, and the strain of maintaining their expensive lifestyle on reduced income. "I don't know how people our age are supposed to get ahead," she'd complain while eyeing Margaret's jewelry box. "Everything costs so much more than when you and Mom were starting out. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever feel financially secure." The requests for money started small and seemingly reasonable. Rebecca needed help with car repairs, then house maintenance, then Mark's business loan payments. Each request came with elaborate explanations about temporary setbacks and promises of quick repayment that never materialized. "I hate asking you for help, Daddy," she'd say with tears in her eyes. "But we're family, and family takes care of each other, right?" I gave her thousands over several months, watching my retirement savings shrink while her problems somehow never got solved. Margaret's illness had been expensive, even with insurance, and Rebecca knew exactly how much the medical bills had cost us. She'd been intimately involved in managing the financial aspects of her mother's care, which gave her detailed knowledge of my remaining assets and monthly expenses. "Dad, you're spending way too much trying to maintain this big house by yourself," she'd argue. "Maybe it's time to downsize, invest the difference, and let someone else handle the maintenance stress." The conversations about my health became more frequent and more pointed. Rebecca would research articles about pneumonia in elderly patients and share statistics about recovery rates and complications. "At your age, every illness is serious," she'd say, with exaggerated concern. "You need to think about quality of life, not just quantity. Sometimes fighting too hard to stay alive isn't fair to yourself or the people who love you." I thought she was processing grief about potentially losing another parent, but now I understand she was preparing herself to help that loss happen. The most disturbing change was how Rebecca started talking about my future like it was a burden she was nobly accepting. "When something happens to you, I'll take care of everything," she'd promise. "The house, the business, all the arrangements. You don't need to worry about being a burden to anyone." But the way she said "when" instead of "if" should have been a red flag. My daughter had stopped hoping I'd live a long, healthy life and started planning for my death like it was an inevitable business transaction that would solve all her problems. When I was admitted to the hospital with pneumonia, Rebecca saw it as the perfect opportunity to solve her financial problems permanently. She'd researched my condition obsessively, learning that pneumonia was still a leading cause of death in elderly patients and that complications could arise suddenly without warning. "Daddy, you need to be realistic about this," she told me during my second day in the hospital. "At your age, pneumonia can be very serious. We should probably discuss your wishes about life support and aggressive treatment." Rebecca had brought legal documents disguised as precautionary measures, new power of attorney forms, updated beneficiary information for my accounts, and what she claimed was a simplified will that would avoid probate complications for my heirs. "I've been talking to lawyers about protecting your assets," she explained while spreading papers across my hospital bed table. "If something happens, we want to make sure everything transfers smoothly without government interference or tax problems." She'd also researched the hospital's protocols and staffing patterns, learning when the halls were quietest and which nurses worked which shifts. Rebecca volunteered to stay with me during overnight hours, claiming she was too worried to sleep at home. "I want to be here in case you need anything," she'd tell the nurses, establishing herself as the devoted daughter who never left her father's bedside. It was the perfect cover for planning my murder. The financial pressure had intensified dramatically since my hospitalization. Mark's business was failing, their mortgage was 3 months behind, and credit card companies were threatening legal action. Rebecca's desperation was becoming more obvious as she calculated exactly how much my death would solve their problems. My life insurance policy alone would pay off their debts and fund the lifestyle they'd been trying to maintain on borrowed money and empty promises. During visiting hours, Rebecca would check my medication schedule and ask detailed questions about my treatment plan. She'd befriended several nurses, learning about patient monitoring systems and emergency response procedures. "I want to understand everything about Daddy's care," she'd explain with false concern. "If something changes, I want to know what signs to watch for." But she was really learning how to make murder look like natural causes. The night she tried to kill me, Rebecca had made sure she was alone with me during the shift change when nursing coverage was minimal. She'd given the evening nurse detailed instructions about not disturbing us because I needed rest, creating a window of opportunity when no one would check on me for at least an hour. "He's been sleeping poorly because of all the interruptions," she explained. "Maybe tonight he can get some real rest without constant vital checks." Rebecca had practiced the pillow technique, researching how much pressure and time would be required to cause suffocation that could be attributed to respiratory failure from pneumonia. She'd even prepared her grief reaction, planning to discover my natural death and call for help with appropriate shock and sorrow. The inheritance would solve all her financial problems, and she'd be remembered as the loving daughter who'd stayed by her father's side until the end. But she never counted on Nurse Carol Martinez making an unscheduled room check and witnessing the attempted murder that would destroy Rebecca's carefully constructed facade forever. Carol Martinez had been a nurse for 15 years, long enough to develop instincts about family dynamics that went beyond medical training. She'd noticed something unsettling about Rebecca's behavior during the previous nights. Too much interest in medication schedules, too many questions about monitoring equipment, and a level of familiarity with hospital protocols that seemed unusual for a family member. When Rebecca requested minimal disturbances during the night shift, Carol's professional alarm bells started ringing. Instead of honoring Rebecca's request for privacy, Carol made the decision to increase her monitoring of my room. She developed a routine of checking on patients every 30 minutes during quiet hours, but something about Rebecca's demeanor made her shorten that interval to 15 minutes. Family members who demand too much control over patient care usually have reasons that aren't medical. She'd learned from experience with previous cases. Carol was approaching my room for a routine vital check when she heard Rebecca's voice through the partially open door, speaking in hushed tones that didn't sound like normal bedside conversation. Instead of entering immediately, Carol's instincts told her to observe first and assess what was happening. She positioned herself where she could see into the room while remaining hidden, her phone already in her hand as a precautionary measure. What Carol witnessed defied her worst expectations. Rebecca wasn't comforting her sick father or helping him with medication. She was methodically positioning a pillow over my face while whispering words that sounded more like a funeral directive than a loving goodbye. Carol's nursing training kicked in immediately, but her legal knowledge told her that intervening without evidence would create a he said, she said situation that might never result in justice. Carol made the split-second decision to document the attempted murder rather than stop it immediately. Her phone was already recording when Rebecca pressed the pillow down and spoke those chilling words about not needing to wake up. The audio quality was perfect, capturing every syllable of my daughter's confession and the sounds of suffocation that would prove attempted murder beyond any reasonable doubt. For 90 seconds that felt like hours, Carol continued recording while calculating the exact moment when she'd need to intervene to save my life without compromising the evidence. She could see my oxygen levels dropping on the hallway monitor, but she also knew that Rebecca's crime needed to be fully documented to ensure conviction. The decision required split-second timing. Too early, and Rebecca could claim misunderstanding. Too late, and I might not survive. Carol's intervention was perfectly timed and professionally executed. She entered the room with medical authority, startling Rebecca into immediately removing the pillow while maintaining her facade of concerned daughter. "Mr. Thompson, I need to check your breathing," Carol announced loudly, creating witnesses in the hallway while simultaneously providing medical justification for her presence. Rebecca's guilty reaction was captured on video. The panic, the immediate defensiveness, and the clumsy attempt to explain why she'd been leaning over me with a pillow. The recorded evidence was devastating and incontrovertible. Carol had captured not just the attempted murder, but Rebecca's motive, method, and complete lack of remorse for trying to kill her own father. When police arrived the next morning, Carol's phone contained everything needed to arrest Rebecca for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Her quick thinking and professional courage had saved my life and ensured that my daughter would face justice for the ultimate betrayal of family trust. The next morning brought chaos that Rebecca couldn't control or manipulate. Carol had immediately reported the incident to hospital administration and contacted police, providing them with the recorded evidence before Rebecca could construct any plausible explanation for what had happened. When Detective James Murphy arrived to interview witnesses, Rebecca was still trying to maintain her facade of the devoted daughter who'd been traumatized by her father's breathing difficulties during the night. Rebecca's story fell apart under professional questioning. She claimed she'd been trying to help me breathe better by adjusting my pillows, but the recording clearly showed deliberate suffocation, accompanied by words about not needing to wake up. When Detective Murphy played the audio for her, Rebecca's face went white as she realized her murder attempt had been completely documented. "That's not what happened," she insisted, but her voice carried the desperation of someone caught in an undeniable lie. The investigation expanded rapidly as detectives discovered the depth of Rebecca's financial problems and her detailed knowledge of my assets. They found research on her computer about pneumonia mortality rates, insurance claim procedures, and estate law, evidence that she'd been planning my murder for weeks. Her internet history revealed searches for elderly death pneumonia, life insurance payouts, and inheritance tax avoidance that painted a clear picture of premeditated murder motivated by greed. Mark cracked under pressure during his police interview, admitting that he and Rebecca had discussed letting nature take its course regarding my illness. He claimed he'd never explicitly agreed to murder, but his phone records showed extensive conversations with Rebecca about their financial crisis and how my death would solve their problems. She said it would be like letting him go peacefully, Mark told detectives. I didn't think she meant actually killing him. The hospital's internal investigation revealed that Rebecca had been manipulating staff schedules and visitor policies to create opportunities for unsupervised access to my room. She'd studied shift changes, befriended nurses to learn their routines, and even researched which medications could mask signs of suffocation. Her planning was meticulous and calculating, showing a level of premeditation that horrified everyone involved in the case. David, my older son who lived across the country, flew in immediately when he learned about Rebecca's arrest. His shock at discovering his sister's true nature was heartbreaking to witness. I knew she had money problems, he told me through tears, but I never imagined she'd try to kill you for inheritance money. How do you process the fact that your sister is a would-be murderer? The destruction of our family was complete. Rebecca's greed had turned siblings into strangers and a father's love into evidence in a murder trial. The media attention was overwhelming and humiliating. Daughter attempts to murder father for inheritance became local headlines that followed our family name everywhere. Thompson Construction's reputation suffered as customers associated our business with attempted patricide. David had to hire security for my house after reporters and curiosity seekers made my recovery impossible in peace. Rebecca's crime had destroyed not just trust, but our family's legacy and standing in the community we'd called home for decades. By the end of the week, Rebecca was charged with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and elder abuse. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Carol's recording, her financial records, her internet searches, and Mark's testimony created a case that prosecutors called slam dunk conviction material. My daughter's greed had transformed her from beloved family member to accused murderer in less than 72 hours, proving that blood relationships offer no protection against the corrupting power of desperation and entitlement. 9 months later, I'm sitting in my living room watching Rebecca get sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. The judge called it one of the most callous betrayals of family trust he'd ever witnessed, noting that my daughter had shown no remorse for trying to suffocate her own father for money. Mark received 10 years as an accessory, and their house was sold to pay legal fees and restitution. Their financial problems were solved, but not in the way they'd planned. The trial revealed even more disturbing details about Rebecca's mindset and planning. Prosecutors presented evidence that she'd been researching my death for months, calculating inheritance taxes and insurance payouts while I was still healthy. Her computer showed she'd even looked into hiring someone to make my death look accidental, but decided that doing it herself during my illness would be cheaper and more believable. The coldness of her calculations shocked everyone in the courtroom. Carol Martinez testified as the star witness, explaining how her nursing experience had warned her that something was wrong with Rebecca's behavior. Loving family members don't research patient mortality rates or demand minimal nursing supervision, she told the jury. Mrs. Thompson was acting like someone planning a crime, not grieving a sick parent. Carol's quick thinking and courage had saved my life and provided the evidence needed to convict Rebecca beyond any doubt. David has been trying to rebuild our fractured family, but the damage goes deeper than either of us initially understood. Rebecca's betrayal has made us both question our judgment about people we love. And trust doesn't come easily anymore. How do you ever feel safe again? David asks, when your own sister tried to murder you for money. We're learning to have a relationship built on shared grief for the family we thought we had, rather than the family that actually existed. The hardest part isn't the near-death experience or even the betrayal. It's understanding how completely I misjudged the daughter I'd loved and spoiled for 45 years. Every memory of Rebecca now carries the shadow of knowing what she was capable of when money was involved. The little girl who used to draw me pictures had grown into a woman who calculated the exact value of my death, and I never saw the transformation happening until it was almost too late. I've changed my will to leave everything to charity, with clear instructions that Rebecca receive nothing even if her conviction is overturned. The house will become a shelter for elderly abuse victims, and Thompson Construction will fund scholarships for nursing students like Carol, who dedicate their lives to protecting vulnerable people. Rebecca's greed cost her everything she'd tried to steal, plus the love and legacy she'd taken for granted her entire life. The strangest blessing in this nightmare has been discovering people like Carol Martinez, who risk their own safety to protect strangers from evil. When I see her at the hospital during follow-up appointments, she always asks how I'm healing emotionally, not just physically. Some wounds take longer to close, she says with the wisdom of someone who's seen too much human cruelty. But surviving makes you appreciate the people who genuinely care about keeping you alive. Looking back, I realize that Rebecca gave me an unexpected gift along with her attempted murder: the knowledge of who I can truly trust in this world. Sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones most willing to destroy you, and sometimes strangers with good hearts are the only ones standing between you and evil. Carol Martinez saved my life, but more importantly, she restored my faith that there are still people in this world worth trusting with everything you have left.